the end of the first episode of the two-parter, we've got Brackenreid possibly taking the law into his own hands and straightening things out down by the docks, and Julia in jail. Suffrage movement is a big deal, and it's a theme that we're going to certainly explore a lot in this season because it's a very real thing, and it certainly was at the forefront of news and activity at that time.
Excuse us? May we help you, madam?
Yes, Your Honor. May I speak?
This has been an unusual enough day in court already, so I don't see why not.
My name is Clara Brett Martin. I have standing with the Law Society of Upper Canada.
Clara Brett Martin is very well known in Canadian women's history because she became the first woman barrister in the British Empire, and she couldn't get into law school. So Dr. Emily Stowe and the Dominion Women's Enfranchisement Association took up her cause, and they pressured Oliver Mowat. He was the Premier and the Attorney General, so he had a special act of the provincial parliament which allowed women to study law first, but then he had to pass another act after she graduated in order to get the Bar Association to allow her to be called to the bar. So she was actually called to the bar in 1897.
Once I started delving into this and doing more research for myself, I was like, this is crazy, and I take for granted the position that I'm in as a woman now in 2014 and all the women that came before me to put that in place.
Toronto's port was pretty significant in the early 1900s. There were boat clubs, there were ferry lines, there were coal yards, there's a big steel shipbuilding yard, and all these small finger piers trying to pull in general cargo off the wooden ships, the schooners, as well as the steamers that were running into Toronto Harbor. What's remarkable is how we've completely erased the landscape of 100 years ago. First off, it was about 1,200 feet further north. It's been lake-filled in. What we have is a real emphasis on housing, on retail, on recreation. So it's much more of a people place. That rough and tumble character is completely subsided.
Right now we're shooting at Sherman, which is a 19th century industrial complex in Hamilton. And even though the episode's called On the Waterfront, there's no water to be seen anywhere here.
There wasn't anything that was appropriate to the turn of the century on the real harbour front in Toronto or anywhere else that we could realistically shoot. So it fell to us to turn this location into a harbour front pier that could realistically look like it was turn of the century Toronto. There was a series of shots that we did sort of in what we called Merchant's Alley, and the idea was that this would be located on the pier, at the end of which would be dockside with Toronto's harbour visible beyond. So we placed a large green screen at the end of the alley, and we had all of the people walking around in the alley. For each of those shots, we would remove the green screen and separate our foreground action from the background, and then go about creating a realistic looking harbour. We used some footage that we had shot previously for the water itself, and then we went through a process of adding Toronto Island in the background, a lot of water traffic, ships and boats, and then we finished that off with some seagulls that make it look all the more like a pier in Toronto Harbour. We relied then also on a lot of historically sourced photographs of what Toronto Harbour would have looked like at the time, at the turn of the century, in order to rebuild a conceivable view. There's a crew of compositors who are the last step. They take all of the imagery that's been created, put it together, and try and make it look as blended and as realistic as possible, as though a camera had been there in 1902 doing real photography of the Toronto docklands.
Down at the bottom of Cherry Beach, renowned, infamous Cherry Beach. Way back in the day, if you were on the Cherry Beach Express, it meant the cops were taking you down to the water to lay a beating on you, which is exactly what happens at this point in our episode.
With Murdoch Mysteries, what makes a location good is that it's not polluted with 21st century architecture. That's the key element in doing any location shooting on Murdoch Mysteries, and Cherry Beach obviously We get to see Lake Ontario. We get to see snippets of Toronto Island from there.
Being at the east end of the city, out by the beach, looking back at downtown like we are now, it's the best. I grew up in the beach area for a while and used to head down and look at the sun coming down. It was great.
My favourite place in Toronto is Cherry Beach, which have these wonderful parties all through the summertime.
I used to work on the island, at Ward's Island in Toronto, and I love the beach there. That was a great place to just go sit and be by the water.
The waterfront features prominently in this two-part episode. It's almost a character, if you will. What brought all of these Great Lakes cities to prominence was the ease of shipping and moving goods, so it's really an important story to tell.